What Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle would you be?
I have no idea.
Donatello, Michelangelo,
Leonardo. The blue one? I don't know.
There's one more.
This is a rabbit hole I don't want to go down.
Are your boys into?
Hi everyone, welcome to OSA Backstage. It is almost the end of the season, so it is time for the episode that I bet you've been waiting for. That's right, our interview with maestro and music director Ankush Kumar Bahl. He's ending his tenure with us as music director in just a few weeks with Masterwork 7 and Shostakovich 5. Sauce also cannot believe it. We talk about a number of things, some of them expected, some of them not, like the importance of setting future goals, expected, the importance of pizza at school, slightly unexpected. I also want to, I do it in the episode, but just in case, I want to issue a formal apology to Johann de Meij. His name is not Johann de Meij, so Mr. de Meij, and to everyone who knows and loves Mr. de Meij, I'm very, very sorry. This will not be the first or the last time that I completely botch a word or a name of some kind, but I'm sorry it was you. I really do love your music. In any case, it was a great episode. Serena and I very much enjoyed it, and we think you will too. Enjoy. Maestro, thank you for doing this.
My pleasure. It's good to see you guys.
Would you please introduce yourself?
My name is Ankush Kumar Bahl. I'm the music director of the Omaha Symphony. That's all I got.
Awesome. What is your... There we go. This is why. This is a tag team. It's a tag team.
Other duties as assigned.
Let me make sure that's in every single contract. Okay. We're going to start the usual way with you.
Okay.
What's the very first concert that you can remember going to?
Can I do more than one?
Yeah.
I definitely remember an orchestra coming to my elementary school auditorium and playing stuff. Like all 300 of us sitting in the gym. That happened back then in the 1980s. Orchestras actually did that. And I remember that. I don't remember what they played or anything like that. And I wasn't particularly taken by it necessarily. But I played instruments my whole life. I started on percussion when I was like 4. And then I switched to violin when I told my percussion teacher that I wanted to play notes, like pitches, and I wanted to play with other people. Mm-hmm. He's like, well, playing snare drum in the back of my music shop is probably not for you then. And so I switched to violin. My brother was playing violin. And then I met the band director, 3rd grade, and he said I should play French horn.
3rd grade's really young, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so was that just, so you grew up in the Bay Area?
Yeah, Northern California.
Okay, so was that pretty standard? Was 3rd grade standard? Because that's 9 years old for French horn.
He met us in 3rd grade. I think we were starting 4th grade band. Something like that. It was started 4th grade.
Do they make smaller horns?
I had a full-size horn. I carried it on my back to and from school in the hard case it was in.
Did you imagine you were a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle?
No, but
these
now
are
that
the
you mention
important
it was like tortoise shell. Actually, that's hilarious. It was the case.
Okay, what Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle would you be?
I have no idea.
Donatello, Michelangelo,
Leonardo,
the
blue one. I don't know.
There's one more.
This is a rabbit hole I don't want to go down.
Are your boys into?
They play the video game and they know what it is, and they've maybe seen some cartoons of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Okay, but that wasn't your thing. So you weren't imagining that as you tromped to and from school with your massive French horn on your back.
No. And when he told me, like, we walked in the room and he talked to all of us, and like 3 of us were sitting there, and he like looked at our embouchures and like just kind of did like a kind of a general consensus, like, do you play an instrument now? We sang for him and did little things like that, like very, very minor ear training or ear testing type stuff, like just singing in pitch and whatever, or match my pitch and sing this and do that. And he let the other 2 people go. And I remember I sat there, he's like, you have really good ears. You should play French horn. To which I'm like, what's a French horn? Because I was like, trumpet, trombone. He's like, you're too short for trombone. You play violin, you already have instruments, you sing really well in tune, you have good pitch, you have good ears. French horn, you need good ears to play French horn. So the concert that I went to, after I said, what's a French horn, was again, back in the day, in San Jose, California, there was a French horn choir. And at the local high school, I'm a junior high actually, I remember going to Redwood, going to that auditorium, walking in and seeing like 30 French horns playing all this repertoire And I was blown away. That's the first concert that I remember being like, I want to do that. That's cool.
So this makes me happy for a number of reasons. One, because our very own principal horn, Brett Hodge, has his Horns of the Heartland.
Of course.
And they did an arrangement of Alpine Symphony like for a small army of French horns like 3 or 4 years ago, which was tremendous. So the fact that that is, it makes me sad that that wasn't his original idea, apparently, of an army of French horns, but it makes sense.
It's happened before. Cornucopia.
But it also makes me happy that like you saw the equivalent of a Mission Imagination, which we do 14 to 16 times a year in elementary school.
Yeah, for sure.
Gyms and cafeterias and gyminariums and
Yep.
The zoo.
The zoo. Yeah, definitely saw that. Was into it, saw the horns, and I'm like, I'm in love with this sound. This is a beautiful instrument.
Okay, so how long did it take you to sound like that then?
The first time I picked up a French horn, I started singing through it. I'm like, they're playing, all right? And I didn't know they had to buzz. So it took a minute. But yeah, soon I was able to get a good sound pretty quickly, actually, relatively quickly. And I was very quickly one of the better people in the band. And so that just, when you're like, doing things at a certain level, people start paying attention and giving you more opportunities. And that's kind of what happened with conducting and music and horn and then conducting. The next great concert I saw was a local youth orchestra, the California Youth Symphony. And my friend played viola in it. And up until that point, I'd played violin. I stopped kind of in high school, played in string ensembles. But I was better at French horn, but I only played band music, really. I wasn't into classical music yet. And in the same way that a lot of people are when they're younger. I did the John Williams. I did the Dvorak. I saw got CDs of the Holst and all the things, but like I didn't really know Strauss and Brahms and Schumann in the same way. I knew those composers. And I went to a youth orchestra concert, and I literally brought homework, and I brought like stuff to do. I'm like, this is just an orchestra concert. Whatever. I'm gonna help support my friend, but I have stuff to do. Mm-hmm. I'm very busy. Mm-hmm. Sat there and was blown away again. I'm like, this youth orchestra can play. Like, this is really great. I don't remember what the program was, but I was totally captured by it. And then I auditioned. And I auditioned for the conductor on like band music. I played like really difficult band music. And he's like, well, you don't know what you're doing, but you play it really well. So here's a private teacher.
So this was in high school. You still didn't have a private teacher.
Not on horn.
Okay.
Not on anything. No, my band director gave me private lessons on horn when I was younger. But then I think there was a gap in junior high. And then when I got to the youth orchestra, they're like, you need an actual teacher.
Okay. So so band music, I found, especially having married a trombonist, the band tradition is something I found is extremely rich, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's weird how there's this abyss between orchestras and concert band and wind ensembles, because at school you quickly find out how many talented people are in your wind ensembles and your concert bands and your marching bands, like the things they can do. It's just a totally separate rep.
Yeah.
And so it's weird how that divide exists, and you wouldn't even still playing violin and string ensembles, you wouldn't know about the other, which is a real shame. Really? Because there are composers like Holst, like the English tradition especially, where they cross over.
The brass bands.
But Holst, those English composers especially were big on band music. And you can hear that kind of like, I think that's why those things like The Planets work so well. It's because like that collective color that you can get from a concert band that's not shaken up necessarily by strings and by all the accoutrement that comes with an orchestra. It's just this very cohesive, lovely sound. So I'm not surprised that sound was super important to your band teacher when you started off, because if you can start with a good tone, almost anything's possible, right? So you decided to audition. What was that like, your first couple of weeks in rehearsal in a full orchestra and suddenly having access to this color?
Yeah. Counting rests is a thing. When you're brass or percussion and you're coming from a band tradition where you horned, I played every measure. Like the strings played every measure in orchestra pretty much. In band, I'm like 67 measures of rest. In orchestra, I'm like 67 measures of rest. Or 19, and then it's in different tempo. And then I have to start double tonguing and doing things in Scheherazade I'd never done before in my instrument. So it was a really great learning lesson. And this youth orchestra had a 1 week camp in the woods before we started our season. So it was like intense. And that teacher was there. And so intensely rehearsing, intense private lessons, learning how to double tongue and triple tongue. So I hadn't done that before. Yeah, it was great. But then like that sound opened up. Like it was a different sound world, different repertoire. Now I'm doing Mozart and Brahms, still Strauss and other fun Mahler, things like that. But wow, this is like a really lush, wonderful, rich world.
So when did the podium come into play? When were you invited? Were you just like, I'm going to take it? Like what? At what point? Mine. I mean, you're in the back of the orchestra. Yeah. Let's be honest. You could not be further from the podium. Mm-hmm. How do you go from there to there?
Let's try a quick version of it. I went to Berkeley on my undergrad in undeclared and undecided. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but it was a great school, local and state, cheap tuition, about an hour from where I grew up. And I got in, and it was great. We'll see what happens. I went there, and people from my youth orchestra that were older than me were like, I'm like, I love music. I want to take music classes and learn more while I figure out my real major. And they're like, the gen pop music classes are kind of silly. Like, you're not going to get deep. You should take music major classes if you actually want to learn about stuff. And so I auditioned I took the tests for the music major exam, and I passed out of a bunch of stuff unknowingly and somehow. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, I could like the musicianship classes I could start here, and these classes I could start there, and I could kind of wrap it up in like 2 years. So I'll do my music major. I'll look for my other major, my real job. Mm-hmm. And so freshman year I was a music major. Sophomore year I picked up rhetoric, also a useful major. Parents were real proud. But that was for like law school or business school. A lot of people went from rhetoric to law school, and I kind of I was thinking about being a judge. I liked law. I liked legal theory. I liked justice. I liked helping people. I liked trying to be like the logical, wise person in the room potentially. Mm-hmm. I wanted a big room where I control people with a stick is really what we're talking about here. Yeah, how'd that work? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But in a just and kind way.
A gavel makes more noise.
True. I make zero noise with a baton. But yeah, I took conducting as an upper division class, just like to learn more about it. Like I had done my prerequisites, I'd done my major requirements, and it's just a couple of up division things that you had to do. And I played in the orchestra, I played in the concert band, I played in the marching band, I played in the jazz band, played trumpet.
When did you sleep?
Didn't sleep a lot. Still don't. But played in all the songs. Ever since I got hooked in high school, really, like literally, I mean, period 1 was 1. Then we had period A was marching band, period B was jazz band, period C was like I was at school like 5:36 in the morning. Boom, 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 boom. First period band, and then the rest of the rest of the day. But yeah, I just took it. So I knew the conductor, played on all these ensembles. Conducting is certainly interesting to anyone who plays an orchestra a little bit, I think, just like to learn more about it. And I took the conducting class, and I just got into it. And the teacher saw something and said, "You should try to do this."
Do you remember the rep from that first? Because I hadn't. Okay, so what was the rep?
I mean, he made us do all sorts like Magic Flute Overture and recitatives, and like he really taught us how to conduct like recitative stuff in Mozart. I'm sure Beethoven 5 was played. We'd stand up there for two pianos, and we'd play the piano and do the whole thing. And then once in a while, he let us do the orchestra, conduct the orchestra. I don't remember the first time I conducted an orchestra what the piece was, sadly. Concert, yes, but the first time I actually got up in front of the Berkeley Symphony, I don't remember what the repertoire was.
What was that concert?
The first concert?
Yeah.
First orchestra concert I did, I put together myself. I called it the Berkeley Chamber Orchestra. Mm-hmm. It was Barbara Adagio for strings, Copeland Appalachian Spring, and the second half was Beethoven 4.
Okay.
And I got some funding, and the first rehearsal I gave everyone milk and cookies. The second rehearsal I gave everyone pizza. Third rehearsal I did something else, I don't remember. And then after the concert, I hosted a party at my house. And I had a lot of really great people in the orchestra, because I just drew from the youth orchestra, some subs in San Francisco Symphony, some people in Berkeley, some people from all the area. And by then I'd just been very connected to music. I had like 6 or 10 concertmasters in my violin section. And Teddy Abrams played clarinet because he was in the youth orchestra. So for example, it's kind of and my principal bassoons in Toronto Symphony, and I could go through the list, but it was just kind of, and then I went from there.
And there is a tradition. So I'm curious what school was like for you, because at Indiana we had ad hoc orchestras, and so similar idea. Someone wants to do something. I remember Nick Hirsch, who conducted here in November. He did one so that he could premiere his arrangement of Bohemian Rhapsody for viola solo and orchestra, which was
as God intended,
amazing. And you were paid essentially in pizza and beer. The beer not at the school. The beer would always be after the performance, but pizza was like the standard form. And, you know, on one hand, you think as like a 30 something, I cannot work for pizza. But as a 20 something, you get to play a repertoire that you've never gotten to play before, and you're playing with your friends. It's kind of, it's like an adventure.
Yeah.
So did they have those?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed. You were still paying your friends in pizza to do, I mean, the typical stuff. We did Stravinsky Octet, Soldier's Tale, Appalachian Spring for 13 instruments. Find the music for that, like for anything, somewhere, somehow, and then, you know, pass it out and harass people in their practice rooms so they don't say no to you over text, things like that. And I will, you know, please, the only time that the room is available is 8 a.m. on a Thursday, but I'll pay you pizza at the end of the semester, you know?
Oh,
yes. Yep.
I also love that there's a degree of, you can't go softly into this. You have to be willing to knock down doors. You have to be willing to, you have to become librarians. You have to become producers and stage managers. And there's
all that.
Very uncomfortable at points to put together a group of people who did not collectively sign up for something.
Right.
But okay, so you eventually, you had that first concert.
Yeah.
When did you know you were going to go that direction? Was it before or after that, or did something solidify that decision?
I just, to your point, like you kind of do whatever you can to get those opportunities. Like once you catch the conducting bug, you just want to do it more, because you realize every time you're on the podium how much you learned and how much you grew and how much you need that flight time. And if you don't have that flight time, it's hard to practice our craft. And so you try to get that flight time. And I was at Berkeley, where there's like 40 or 50 music majors, but then a lot of people play music because they're smart and they just play an orchestra and everything. So I was lucky. I was an IU with 13 conducting majors, and a bunch of undergrads want to do it too. Like I was an undergrad. I was like one of a handful of conductors that actually was thinking about this. And so it was a little bit easier, but you still like, you do whatever you can. Like, so the band director was like, I need you to play principal horn, the wind ensemble director at Berkeley. And I'm like, I will play principal horn for you on this semester, but I want a concerto and I want to conduct something on a concert. And so you just barter. He wanted me to play horn. I'm like, great, I'll do that. But then I want this and this. And I played Strauss with the band, and I conducted El Salon Mexico by Alfred Reed. Oh, no, Copeland. Sorry. It's El Camino Real. Take that out. Cut. But it's a copy of El Salon Mexico. It's called El Camino Real. It's by Alfred Reed. And it's like a really funny version of El Camino Real.
I'm sorry, El Camino
Real.
That's okay.
King's Highway.
Fantastic. So it's a play on the Copeland.
It feels like a lift.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fun.
It was a fun piece. Alfred Reed's was a great band composer. He has some really epic pieces.
This is a good point to acknowledge, by the way, that I completely mispronounced Johann de Meij in our last recording. I called him Johann de Meij also.
Oh, de Meij, yeah.
De Meij is also a fantastic band composer. And
he did the Lord of the Rings suite, which is amazing.
That's exactly right. And to Mr. de Meij, and anyone who knows and loves him, I'm very sorry.
You can overdub it, re-release it.
The re-release. Oh, okay, that's fun. So you started bartering for more podium time. Is it generally accepted then that if you are not bending over backwards consciously or subconsciously to get more podium time, that this is not for you?
I mean, kind of, in a way where I feel like it's not like a rite of passage, but it's almost like you learn so much through that process that if that is too difficult, then a lot of other things about conducting later on will be kind of difficult. I guess it's the same, I guess, with any other music major where going through a degree or something, a performance degree is there's so much that's thrown at you. And if it's almost like, there's so much pressure that you need to learn how to handle that, to be able to like make it through auditions and years of rejection and all sorts of other things.
That's a solid point. If you're not willing to be uncomfortable, then this is probably not the place for you. Okay.
And that goes for all music.
I think
all musicians. Yeah.
A lot of majors, like at Berkeley, a lot of people walk in freshman year in the dorms, I want to be a doctor, and then take organic chemistry, and they don't want to be a doctor anymore. And so we call it the Weeder course. Mm-hmm. And there's things along the journey of conducting that will prevent you from going to the next step. And that's normal. And I actually tried to create those bottlenecks myself naturally, because I didn't want to do something that I was going to be bad at, or I wasn't be successful at, or wasn't going to be able to make a career out of. So I'd always be asking teachers, I'm like, what do you see in my conducting that I need to work on? Or do you see any deal breakers? Or I remember I told my mom when I graduated Berkeley, I took the LSATs, I took the GMATs, and I said, these are good for 5 years. This is my GPA. I can get to this level of law school. But give me a couple years to try to get into a nice grad program. And once I did that, I was like, give me a couple years to like actually earn money. And I was just lucky to hit those markers for myself before my expiration dates. But you have to get lucky. You have to work hard. To your point, like you said, if you're not hustling, you're doing it wrong, and maybe it's not for you.
And I think there's different versions of hustling, right? Yeah. Like there's, there are people who they're never out of the practice room, and like that's their version of it. And just because they're not constantly seeking out opportunities doesn't mean that they're not putting in the work, but it just you see them bloom in different ways. Mm-hmm. But did you have mentors besides the teachers you were working with at Berkeley who kind of gave you those timestamps or those expiration dates for certain points? Or did you were you kind of putting those in for yourself?
I was putting them for myself.
Okay. What felt natural then? Because again, this is like, well, if I don't succeed at this by this age, like what were your cutoffs?
The ones I described already, like getting into a top program. Like if I got into what I felt was like a second or third or fourth tier conducting program, I thought that may be a signal to the world telling me that maybe I shouldn't be doing this. If I graduated, I waited until I took a year off from Berkeley, and I spent that in Ann Arbor, and I got into a top program after really working hard to get into work on those entrance exams and stuff. And so that to me was one like, okay, I got these 7 auditions at these top 7 schools, and I won these auditions, and I'm going to go to New York to study. And it was great. And it was a really lucky program with a great teacher, full ride. It was amazing.
Who was your teacher?
His name is Denik McCall, passed away a handful of years ago. He's a great Czech conductor, and he was the music director of Milwaukee at some point. When I was in New York, his music director of New Jersey Symphony. And after he left New Jersey Symphony, he became the music director of the Czech Philharmonic, his hometown band. And he is an amazing, amazing conductor. Like people in New York Phil and New Jersey Symphony still talk about his concerts. He was a phenomenal conductor.
What changed from Berkeley to working with him? Were there things that he adjusted immediately?
It's a really great question. And it's kind of informs the way I think about teaching conducting and the way I work with conductors. So many teachers are thinking about the conducting technique, and they like tell you how to hold this and how to do this, and this is the table, and this is an upbeat, and this is your tree unity subdivide, and this is your 3 pattern, and this is what your 9 pattern, and all these things.
Ceiling, floor, window, door.
There you go. Mm-hmm. And I had that. I had a great undergrad teacher who taught me like recitative and like pattern, normal stuff. My 2 great youth orchestra conductors, high school and then college, San Francisco Youth Symphony, with Alistair Neal, who's visited this orchestra before. So they were just always around, and I would show them tapes, and then we talk about stuff. And then I had Ken Kiesler in Michigan, and that was like technician galore, just amazingly sound fundamentals. And then I went to Aspen before my master's degree. So I had David Zinman and that whole school, Monte School-esque energy. And so I got to Manhattan School of Music with a decent amount of fundamental knowledge about conducting, but I still didn't know anything because I was 20 whatever years old. But I had decent technique, and I had decent fundamental that had served me thus far. But what was great about Dani, Maestro McCall, was that he didn't talk about technique. He didn't care how you looked. He didn't care what patterns you're using and where you subdivided and anything. What he did, though, was he was always listening. And I've talked to you about this. I've talked to a lot of people about this. If your biggest tool for conductors is your ears, and it should inform everything about everything, your technique, your rehearsal process, anything you do in rehearsal, anything you do when you're studying, anything, your ears are driving you. And that's what he did. So there were 3 of us in the conducting class. We had 3 hours with the Manhattan School Symphony. They were paid, and we had a full orchestra every lesson, once every Monday. And we would just get up and conduct. And he would just listen, and he'd be like, it sounds bad. So let's diagnose why it sounds bad. Your technique is off. Your rhythm is behind. You're not leading. You don't know how to rehearse. Rehearse better. Don't rehearse like that. Rehearse this. Look at this. Where's the motor? What are you looking for? What do you listen like? He was listening, and he didn't care what we looked like on the podium. He cared what it sounded like. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we had to adjust to the sound and make it sound better. Again, whether our technique was flawed, didn't know the score well enough, didn't know how to rehearse. So every master class I had with him was a rehearsal. And that was life-changing.
Mm-hmm. Were those exhausting? You've talked about this before, and with Maurice. Yes. Was that as exhausting as it sounds?
It was terrifying.
Okay.
Because you didn't know what you were going to run into that day, what kind of mood he was in. And if you throw off the podium and start conducting himself to show you how great he was and how you're supposed to do it, and you're just like when Zinman did that, or when anyone does that, you're just like, ugh.
Bass teachers do that too, for the record.
Oh, great! Do they?
Yeah. If you
don't know what you're doing.
I was in an orchestra class, and we were working on Mozart 35, and one of the students in the class played it. So the format was you played it together as a group with a recording, and then as a group without the recording, and then one by one you'd play it individually. Mm-hmm. And we got to studio mate, and he played it, I don't know, 10 clicks under tempo, 20 clicks under tempo. And when he stopped, the teacher asked, why can't get away with that? And he was like, I can't do it at tempo on this bow.
Famous last words.
Next thing you know, he's on the floor. The teacher's got the bass. He's cranking out this Mozart 35 above tempo, mm-hmm. just to do it. And then he hands the bass back to him, and he goes, "It's not your equipment."
Yes.
I think Pahud famously does that, where he will always borrow someone else's flute to show them that it's able to be done on that person's flute in master classes, mm-hmm. or at least that's what I've been told. Mm.
It has to be done at some. There's a threshold. There's a threshold of equipment where the player can be hampered by a level, but usually after that threshold, you have to admit that the common denominator is you.
Yeah. So and your work ethic and what your practice technique or your study time or whatever it is.
So you kind of lived in this interestingly educational dictatorship then when you were
he wasn't a dictator. He was just crazy. He was insane. So you just didn't know what you're going to get, and that's in a sense it was terrifying. But it was such a fertile learning environment, and it really it informs everything I do today.
Did you watch him with his own? You got to see him with his own orchestras. Okay, so what did you learn watching him rehearse his own orchestras versus rehearsing orchestras?
Well, like I said, it was the same. Like he's only listening to what it sounds like, and the orchestra knows when the conductor's listening and going for a certain sound. That's how Mazur was. That's how Zenny was. And they know if they're actually listening and responding to what they're hearing versus in my score, I've done this 6 times and every time the flute's late. And in my score, that's a wrong note. I'm just rehearsing from my score versus rehearsing from my ears. And so he was just that. And you learn off the podium stuff too. He never showed up early. Not that I do this on purpose, but he would always show up to the podium 2 minutes before. He'd leave right after. But the whole break, he was on the podium. Ask me any questions you want. He did not leave the stage. That was the time you could go to him. Who as a student, as a musician in the orchestra, as an administrator. So you just kind of learn little things like that.
When you say it lovingly that he was crazy, did his orchestra see that? Mm-hmm. Or was that okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. How about, not to let's go through a list of conductors and see what they actually acted like. But was that true of all the conductors you had as mentors? Was the person that they were when they rehearsed you the same as what was presented on the podium with their orchestras?
Well, I can ask you as a musician, and I can ask you as a musician and a conductor. I think musicians know when the person on the podium is not genuine and not being themselves. And so I found that my mentors were always themselves with me off the podium, with their friends, with their conducting colleagues, as a teacher, as a spouse, as an employee or an administrator, like a colleague with like me and you and me and Jennifer, of course. And I think, and then you go on the podium and you're just yourself. And the orchestras can tell when you start putting on the black turtleneck and talking a slightly different accent and parsing your words and like whatever.
This is a really hard thing to do and to learn, though. I had a long conversation, or many conversations, with my teacher who said it took him a really long time to meld that, because sometimes, at least his experience back then, like being in Germany in the 70s and 80s, it was a really rough time, and he felt that he had to kind of put on a strong personality and a very different person. But then, as he got older, all this, 50 years later of experience, he goes, now I can feel comfortable in front of, the students and in front of you and teaching. And he's, from what I've seen, very much the same on and off podium. But he gets it, and he's talked about how that's something he's had to overcome.
And that's very interesting, because there's also clearly a difference from being a totally different person and or keeping things compartmentalized, right?
Sure.
It's like when I'm on the podium, this is the only thing I am concerned about. Everything else in my life melts away. You don't have to know everything that's going on. I'm still the same person, but this is not what we are concerned about. Are you able as a conductor, because I'll rephrase, when we were talking with Judy, one of the great things she said was coming to the hall was like, no matter what was going on in her life, she had the hall. So she could come in and sit down in what she called the best seat in the house, right? And everything else could kind of melt away. And this was her grounding force. So even if you are still being yourself, do you feel that when you're on the podium, is there a separation?
You certainly have to take anything from home or school or teacher or anything else and block it out. If it's going to make you less confident, right? If you're like, or if you feel any kind of insecurity, that has to go away. I remember one teacher saying, look, when you're at home, you're wrong and you're studying and you're learning and you're growing and you're shedding and you're making decisions and making wrong decisions and correcting yourself. Like you're doing that shedding at home when you're studying your score. When you're on the podium, you're always right. I don't do that all the time. I actually like being wrong, and I like being that collegial and having that interaction today. But it made sense in this back then, because again, it's like you're shedding insecurities. You have to be confident. When someone asks you about a note, you have to be confident and say what you want or how you want something, a glissando or a grace note, or pick a thing. You have to be decisive. So I think that's one thing you kind of have to put on a little bit. But I mean, I think we're all confident in our own personal lives as well, but it's just a different level. It's a different level of just being yourself, but being your best self. Like you have a filter, like you don't use profanity in front of an orchestra. You don't talk about politics necessarily. There are filters. When you see me at a restaurant with my friends, I'm going to talk about certain things. When I come in front of the orchestra, there's a filter. Obviously, it's just you're in a group of very diverse individuals with diverse backgrounds, personalities, and other experiences, and you want them to be their best selves as well when they're on stage, and you want to put them at a disadvantage and make them feel less confident. So there is a working conductor Ankush versus the friend at the restaurant Ankush, for sure. But I think it's still me.
Right. Is there a mindset you get into before you step on the podium? Like, is there a 5 minutes before performance, this is where I am? Is there 2 minutes before? Is there any sort of relief that comes from stepping on the podium when you just know it's time? There's nothing more that can be done. We're going to do it now.
I think that's it. There's a relief because you've done all you can, done the rehearsals all you can. Now you just get to enjoy it. Now you just enjoy the product and make that connection with the musicians and have a smile and have a look and shape a phrase. And now we're kind of getting into it, and it's fun. And for a lot of conductors, including me, for most of the time, it's like your happiest place on earth. Besides your family and your kids and all the other things that you really love about life, when you're similar to what Judy said, when I step on the podium, it's like you shed everything else. And right now it's just you and the musicians and maybe you and the composer. Mm-hmm. And that's the best feeling. And it's very freeing and it's very comfortable. And I'm lucky it was very comfortable early on. It's something I enjoyed people watching. I enjoy being in a competition or in an audition and I see a panel of people. I'm like, best Ankush is about to show up. You're going to see some stuff.
Speaking of some stuff. Did your taste in music change the moment you were up there? Would you say the things you enjoyed? Because there's French horn you, mm-hmm. and then there's conductor you. Mm-hmm. Are they two different musicians when it comes to what you enjoy doing? 1,000,000,000%. Okay,
so I grew up playing as a nerdy horn player. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What's my equipment? Which valve oil am I using? What's your bell? What's your shape? What kind of case are you going to buy? What mouthpiece are you using? I'm going to gold plate my mouthpiece now because my teacher told me to. Super nerd out French horn.
Brass players are the worst.
We are the worst. The trombone, I can't imagine. But yeah, we're focused on ourselves, and I think that's makes us really great at our instruments. But people in orchestras, not everybody, but there are certain people in orchestra that are very focused on themselves and focused on their instrument. And I was certainly one of them. And maybe we're not listening as much across, or maybe we're not empathetic to the person who's playing third horn to my first horn who has to tune with me. But eventually you start opening that up. So when I started playing in youth orchestras and I had a good coach and I had good teachers, I started realizing I'm with the violas here. I started realizing that we're going to follow the concertmaster here. I started realizing that I'm playing the third I'm playing fourth horn and I'm going to be an octave lower or third lower or fifth lower or higher. And what does that mean intonation wise? Where are we going with this? But
which led you to enjoy playing that rep.
Yes.
I would say. Right?
The repertoire I liked playing was what my youth orchestra conductor liked programming, which was Strauss and Mahler and bang, 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 big stuff.
Yep.
Episodic, momentous, huge music.
So what changed when you got on the podium?
I saw even a bigger picture. I started talking about playing French horn and kind of widening your scope and widening your presence in orchestra and kind of listening more. And when you're on the podium, you're listening to everybody. Mm-hmm. And so you are empathetic to the string playing. And I was a violinist at some point, but now you're listening to those details and those phrases, and you realize you can't get the sound you want from the woodwinds that you can get from the strings, or vice versa. You can't get this beautiful oboe sound in a viola necessarily. And so you're realizing there's so much more out there, and there's so much more colors to choose from and repertoire to choose from. And my mentors. So I started working with Kurt Mazur, and I started working with older European people potentially. And my repertoire just started to shift. And you get older and you start appreciating different things.
Yeah.
So I don't love Strauss anymore. I don't love Mahler the same way I used to. But Brahms and Schumann and Mendelssohn and Beethoven. It's just I just find deeper. Also, you're setting a score. You're just finding more, Beethoven's, you can never stop setting a Beethoven score. You'll never uncover all the answers and all the truths that he writes in it. And that, when you shift from what valve oil am I going to use, to how is he making that harmonic progression? Where does he come up with this stuff? What is he doing here? Why is it different here? Why is it articulate? He's just, what is he doing here? He's mad. He's crazy. And you're spending 8 hours pouring over pages of a Beethoven score or a Brahms symphony, and it just makes your perspective very different.
What's sad about the Beethoven analogy is that he most likely did not get to hear the things that we agonize over. Mm-hmm. And that almost makes it, I wish we'd caught it. You were talking about strum and how it's so different to play a piece where the composer has literally laid everything out for you beautifully, exactly as she wants it to happen, so it will sound exactly the way she intended. There is not an ambiguity there, which is kind of when you're dealing with the Beethovens and the Brahms of the world and the Mendelssohns of the world. It's nice to have a strum, mm-hmm. But she gets to hear it,
and try and change it and tweak it, and yeah.
And so deep diving. So you kind of like the repertoire where it's not as laid out mm-hmm. on the page. Maybe that's why you don't like. Maybe that's why Strauss and Mahler have gone aside, because they couldn't help themselves. They have a they have a directive every measure of every single piece that they write.
Yeah, Mahler wrote his, as you guys know, but audience may not. Mahler put in his scores what a conductor would write. Not too fast there. Don't rush here. Like
it's the don't rush here that always gets me.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, but no, don't rush. But what does that directive really mean? Does he just want the tempo to stay steady?
no,
things
he's just
like
sitting
that.
in doctor. He's like, I know people are going to rush here. People are going to compress this rhythm here. Don't rush.
And what's fantastic is it's all in German,
Yeah,
and so it adds this degree. Adds this degree of like
lecture
to it, and you first see it. If you haven't studied any German at all, you've gone from all these symphonies where the words are understandable, they are common musical expressions that you use, to suddenly like you need to understand German to understand
it's full sentences, paragraphs.
What the hell is going on? And then you realize it's things like that. Just don't rush. It's these asides, just these notes to oneself.
Go faster here, but not too fast.
Yes,
Right.
That's another.
Yes.
Don't screw this up.
My teacher, Mahler 2, the opening is a really big bass excerpt for auditions, and it has WILD written at the top, wild or wild. And so every lesson on it, he'd start it with, what does that mean? And if you said wild, he would say savage. And if you said savage, he would say wild. And I think that kind of sums up Mahler in it. Okay. That's fun. So you enjoy it. Like your taste has pieces that you can deep dive.
I think you're right. Deep dive, and also have like most ownership over an expression. Like I can make this metal symphony. It's not like the Strauss plays itself. Like Don Juan goes at this tempo. The orchestra's played the first page for every audition they've ever taken. This is how this piece goes. In Mendelssohn, I'm making choices, and just because he doesn't write everything out like Mahler does, he doesn't, and people interpret it differently. And so, like, we would listen to recordings from Mazur and Abato and Karajan and whoever, and they're all different, and because there's so much room to be different. And so I feel like pieces I can make a stronger musical stamp on.
So with Shostakovich, with that in mind, and Shostakovich coming up, how do you? He's in that middle area, right? Where it's a piece that very famously is argued over. What did he mean? Because even more famously, he couldn't be explicit. It was not a good time to have your opinions explicitly stated for people to rake you over the coals over, right? So in 2025, how do you handle a piece like Shostakovich 5?
Great question. I think our whole lives inform Shostakovich and his Fifth Symphony. I think your life experiences culminate in a Shostakovich 5. And I think the best composers put their own lives in a piece, as Shostakovich we know did. What he was afraid of, what he was loved, what he hated, what he was fighting against all the time. But the best composers write that for them. But it's so general and universally felt emotion. There's such universally felt emotions that they apply to you today. 2025, 2004, when I did my master's recital, 4 or 5, like it applies to then too. And you're only going to grow and deepen your relationship with a piece like that and say that's what it felt like when that person dumped me, or when I was afraid, or when I was insecure, or when I was happy, or when I was angry. And yeah, you're absolutely right that Shostakovich couldn't explicitly say what he wanted in this piece, and especially the last movement, where there are different ways to interpret it. And I've always interpreted it as a painful and brooding and agonizing finale with very little pleasure is taken by that. Enjoyed, I should say. And other people do it differently. They go twice as fast. And it's a really triumphant ending. And it's equally interesting.
It's very much in the line of you can deep dive it. You can make your own assessment. Is it fair to say that even if we're going for excruciating, even if we're turning the screws, right? Can we agree that there's something that endures though about someone who will get through that pain?
I think that's a great way to put it. It's like through that pain, through that commitment, through that catharsis, there is a triumph at the end because you made it and you achieved and you're still surviving and you're thriving and you've accomplished so much. So I think there will still be smiles on the orchestra's faces, and there will be people in the audience who are just taken away by such a triumphant, strong ending, whether it's happy to them or sad to them or painful or overcoming great obstacles.
It kind of sounds like in a way, it almost sounds like deciding you're going to become a conductor. In all seriousness, there's an endurance there. There's a choosing a path and knowing that before you is everything possible that could be thrown in your direction, and it will be a joy, but it will be a painful joy, and it will continue to be a painful joy for as long as you choose to do it if you want to be successful.
You've earned it.
You've earned it.
You've worked hard, you've earned it, and now you get to enjoy it.
I like that.
And still work hard and earn it again.
You don't get to stop working hard, unfortunately, but the enjoyment is definitely there.
It's come up a couple of times, so I'm going to quote my teacher from my undergrad, David Milnes, because again, I was trying to recreate those roadblocks and be like, why would I be successful, or why wouldn't I be successful as a conductor? And so I asked him one time, I said, conducting, but also music schools, because he went to Yale and Juilliard and other places. I'm like, how many of your friends, because now you're 40 something back then, are still doing music, are still conducting? Like, how many people are still doing it? They had a master's degree in Juilliard. Are they still playing flute or conducting or whatever? And he's from New York. He's like, everyone who's doing it is still doing it. And I thought that was a dumb answer back then. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Now I know what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. Those who are working on it and working hard and still grinding and still trying to achieve and still persevering, they're going to do it. Those who felt there was an escape hatch here, because I had a family, or because it got too hard, I wasn't making enough money, or I have other interests, I decided to be a carpenter instead, they're not doing it anymore. Did the world tell them to stop, or did they tell themselves to stop? He's like, I don't know, but if they're still doing it, they're still doing it.
If you look for a trapdoor, you're going to find it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I want the last question to be as upbeat as possible. You know, we ended real heavy there with Shostakovich, but okay, so you've been on the podium, you've been in the back of the orchestra, you played percussion, you played violin, but if you had 30 minutes, no consequences, could play or do anything in the orchestra.
What?
Yeah. Could literally just walk up to someone, take their instrument, and honk away for 30 minutes.
And I could play that instrument, or I'd be honking away. But magically, it's a Groundhog Day, I all of a sudden can play Rachmaninoff on a piano.
Okay, let's say that you are like Bill Murray, who wake up every day and have access to the instrument to practice and suddenly get infinitely better. Mm-hmm. So what are you going to do?
That's a fun question. If I had to play an instrument that's not French horn well, it would probably be cello. I do love the cello.
Okay.
If I was going to bang on something for 30 minutes, it'd probably be timpani.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Yep.
Like that'd be fun to drive the orchestra that way from the back. Mm-hmm. I think those are my answers. And if I wasn't a conductor or a musician, I'd probably be you. Programming, being nerdy, picking conductors, picking soloists, picking repertoire, and deep diving in that way.
The nerdiness is the best part of the job. It is
the best part of the job.
Maestro, thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Good to hang out with you.
Yeah. Good. That was great.
Thank you all.
That was easy peasy, little squeezy.